we want to talk though about this crazy jewelry heist that
Wow.
happened, and at the Louvre Museum in Paris, still closed right now, as police are trying to figure
Yeah.
out what on earth happened. And Tim Carpenter is going to be joining us. Actually, he's here right now,
Hey,
right?
Tim, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I got you good.
Excellent. Tim,
Thanks for having me on.
yeah, of course. Just like all of us, when you woke up seeing those headlines, were you a little, struck by what happened, or was this kind of expected in your line of work?
Well, look, guys, I'd love to tell you that after 20 years of working art crime investigations, I was completely unfazed. That's not true, right? I mean, like everybody, of course, I was a bit shocked. I can't say super surprised. We've seen an uptick in this type of crime just in recent months and in the last couple of years, particularly across Europe. So I can't say it was super surprising, but it's hard to process, right, that it's the Louvre.
Mm-hmm. And for folks who don't know who you are, just give us your background real quick.
Yeah, so I was the former head of the FBI's art crime team program. So I started on that team as an investigator for a number of years and then was fortunate enough to promote and take over that program. So I ran that out of our headquarters in DC for about 6 years. I'm retired from the FBI now, so now I run a company called Argus Cultural Property Consultants, and we offer kind of the same kind of work that we did for the FBI, only now we're doing it in the private sector, where we continue to try to offer our experience and expertise to the museum world, private collectors, others that are involved in the cultural heritage space. So that's what we're doing now. I think ready to retire from government life, but not ready to put our toys away, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. Tim, can I ask you real quick, how'd you get into this? Have you always had a love and appreciation of art, or was it just a need that the federal government had for that expertise?
Well, a great question, and one that as you might imagine, I get quite a bit. So yeah, as a young guy coming up through school, I was training to be an artist, and I had my sights set on going and getting an art degree and trying to struggle to be an artist. Probably a good thing that I didn't do that. But a little thing called Desert Storm happened, and I instead enlisted in the military, and my life took a bit of a different path. And but years later, after being a police officer, did the military time, was a police officer for a while, and then was fortunate enough to be picked up by the FBI. And even though that was on the heels of 9/11, and so of course at that time everything in the FBI was counterterrorism, but I still had this passion for art. And I think like most folks at the time, I didn't even really fully realize the FBI investigated art crime cases. And so was in the right place at the right time, learned that they worked those cases, and as you can imagine, immediately threw my hand up. And maybe it was a little bit of a bull in a china shop, kind of forced my way to the front of the line and said, I'm going to take all of those cases, which they were happy enough to indulge me, and the rest was history, as they say.
Wow. Tim, you talk about art, and I feel like, if it is like the Mona Lisa or something that is very recognizable, that it would be very difficult to, maybe you could steal it. Okay, let's say you can, and you're able to pull that off, but to like sell it on a market like that would be very difficult. But when you're talking about this one that just happened with these jewels, we were reading that whoever, has them, they're going to divide them up. It's not going to be like, the crown, the tiara.
Right.
They're going to, divide these jewels up and try to sell them that way. Is that kind of what you think might happen?
Well, you're spot on the first half of that part, right? If we're talking about traditional art heist cases, particularly in the museum world, where they're stealing two-dimensional works or even three-dimensional sculptures. So we're talking about paintings, prints, works on paper, and perhaps sculptures. Historically, we've seen those cases, and that is pretty difficult, right? The challenge in that crime is not the theft. That part's fairly straightforward. The challenge has always been, how do you monetize that commodity? How do you move that artwork into the commercial space? Because everyone knows it's stolen.
Yeah.
So to your point, if like the Mona Lisa was stolen, was eventually, Perugia tried to ransom it back to the Louvre because he learned the hard way. He couldn't sell it on the commercial market. And so it was effectively worthless. But what we've seen, the disturbing trend in recent years, right, is criminal organizations have been slow to realize this, but they are realizing it's increasingly difficult to move these things into space. So they have since turned to targeting precious metals, right? Gemstones and precious metals that exist in a museum's collection, because those things are easy to move into the commercial market space simply by melting them down and realizing the intrinsic value of the material itself,
Wow.
right? So that's the risk here with this case. Certainly, it's the worst case scenario, right, as we contemplate what might happen to this collection. But I do want to pause, though, and just point out there are a couple of other scenarios that, as criminal investigators, that we're going to be keen on watching. Now, this is not my investigation. I trust that the local authorities in Paris are going to conduct a robust and very thorough investigation, and that evidence will take them where it will. But let's consider also that there are a couple of other scenarios that might play out here, right? So these thieves were kind of sloppy, right? They were pretty good. Clearly, they had done their homework. They were very fast, but they made some mistakes. They left behind evidence, right, which presents the opportunity to develop forensic evidence and a number of other things that the local authorities are going to be looking at. And so I think the likelihood is high that they're apprehended. And so they're probably concerned about that right now. And because they're concerned about being apprehended, they may be preserving this collection for use as a leverage tool in any prosecutorial decisions that might occur, right, once they are apprehended. So we do see that from time to time. That's certainly a possibility. The best case scenario is, of
Hey,
course,
Tim,
that the
we're going
police
to
do a
stop
really
you there just
fantastic
one
job.
second. We're going to stop you there just one second. Welcome back, guys, on this Monday and Fox 10 Talks. We've been talking with Tim Carpenter and former FBI super agent, I would call him.
Yes.
And dealing
art aficionado.
Yes, absolutely. And so we wanted to bring Tim back in because there was a lot to talk about with the jewelry heist in Paris. And Tim, before we let you go, you were kind of talking about the best case scenario. You talked about the worst case scenario, but now kind of go over the best case scenario when it comes to this particular crime.
Yeah, so the best case scenario here is, right, the local police do a very effective investigation, which I think have all optimism that they're going to do that. And so that they move quickly, they're able to identify these perpetrators and successfully recover this collection intact. That's the best case scenario. That kind of middle ground scenario is what I just suggested, that they might hold these pieces for ransom or they might hold these pieces for some kind of prosecutorial leverage. The worst case scenario here is, I think, what everybody's been talking about and that they're concerned about, is that they melt these pieces down and they break apart the gemstones and they piecemeal those out to sell them on the commercial market, which, of course, would be a tragedy.
Tim, you talked about the brazenness of this robbery, and we have a map going right now just to show folks of kind of where this happened, and the lift truck that they had, where they had a ladder literally right to the gallery up there so they could go, and the whole thing I think was between 4 and 7 minutes. But can you talk real quick, just everybody's watching this, other museums are watching it. Do you think there's going to be any improvement for kind of these unconventional scenarios where literally they can come cutting through the door any place, broad daylight, any time to make this happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for sure, I think every museum in the world is looking at the situation and they're going to be doing some reflecting, right? They're going to look at their own security posture and ask the right questions and hopefully bring in, some outside objectives, right? To look at, what they're doing with their programs. But I think it's important. Let me be clear, right? There's some sense that a museum is impenetrable. Right. I've heard a lot about these comments since this heist has occurred. What did the Louvre do wrong? And, was this a massive security failure? And I would just say that if I were to give you $1 billion in cash and I would charge you with the task of protecting and safeguarding that money, I think we would get quite a bit of, some disparate ideas on how to do that. But most of those ideas would involve placing it in a vault, surrounding it with a concertina wire, heavily armed guards, lots of sensors and barriers and all of these things. We're going to make it very difficult for you to get to that $1 billion in cash. But if I change that scenario and say, okay, I'm going to give you this $1 billion of cash, but you have to put it into a building where your sole mission is to be immediately accessible to the public and inviting and open. Now, how do you protect it? That changes that scenario quite drastically, right? And I think that's the reality of what museums do. They're charged with protecting billions of dollars of cultural heritage collections, but they have to do so in a manner that's open and inviting to their guests and to, so that they don't disrupt the visitor experience. And so every museum is vulnerable to targeted criminal activity, right? It just takes dedicated thieves that do their homework, which clearly is what happened here at the Louvre.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Ocean's 11, Ocean's,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it literally was. That's kind of the way it seemed to me. But no doubt, Tim, I think you're probably going to be busy, as you said. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be reaching out to you. And that's the thing. I mean, with a museum, you want it to be open. You want it to be accessible. That's the point of a museum. But you also don't want, gems and art to be stolen either.
Right.
So hopefully they'll figure this out quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are some valuable lessons to be learned here, and I'm sure that we'll all take a good look at that.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Tim. Appreciate you taking some time for us today.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Okay.